Hello, everyone, and welcome to the Mind, Body, and Soil podcast. I am your host, Kate Kavanaugh, and I am coming to you in this intro from Texas Hill Country after a weekend at the What Good Shall I Do conference. I am so excited to unpack more of my experiences here at the conference for the podcast and to release, I hope, the talk that I had the privilege of giving this weekend. But I am sitting here on a Monday just really deeply inspired about what is possible when we find ourselves in relationship with everything else in the world. And it is with that I want to introduce this week's guest, Andreas Weber, who is an incredible, Andreas holds degrees in marine biology and cultural studies, and he collaborated with the theoretical biologist Francisco Varela before his death. And I found Andreas's work through another guest on this podcast, Brandy Stanley, and really had one of those moments where you feel like you find a missing puzzle piece in your life, something that begins to tie together everything else and becomes a real keystone for the way that you move forward. His book, Biology of Wonder, is amongst my most favorite books that I've ever read, as well as his book, Matter and Desire, an Erotic Ecology. Andreas is an incredible thinker, and I think that he is synthesizing a lot of information about the way that there is this mutual sharing of matter and energy within ecosystems and within life, and that we can seek this aliveness and this meaning creating and poetic reality, as he calls it, in every interaction that we have. I was truly honored to sit down with Andreas. It was a really special moment for me, and I think that the contents of this podcast may just change the way that you think about life as well. I highly recommend picking up Andreas's books and diving into his work, because I think that it really provides a counterpoint to the data-driven work that I think a lot of us seek out, and into a depth of feeling and experiencing that we cannot forsake as part of our human experience of being in this interconnected web of life. I know that I myself have been seeking out a lot more in-person experiences and chances to truly find that basis for connection, both with the landscapes that I occupy and the friendships and the relationships that I am building in this life. I think that it's really easy to get caught up in the way that we couch everything in economic productivity and our value as our output. And I've been really curious as of late just how I can find myself in my relationship to even just the grass under my feet as I walk every day in the pastures on the farm. Sometimes it's walking up the hill right next to my house and just experiencing the subtle shifts of the season where we are, and everything comes on so fast that with each day there are more buds on the trees, there are more insects to be found, more birdsong to be heard, and to be a part of that waking up that is happening in spring, and that felt aliveness that we can access at any given moment. Andreas also has a beautiful course called The Ecology of Love. I have linked to this as well as all of his books in the show notes, and I'm hopeful that his next book, Becoming Edible, will be translated into English. I've also included the translation of the poet Rilke that Andreas and I have an opportunity to discuss. Before we dive into the podcast, I have a couple of housekeeping items. One of which is a little announcement about the Old Salt Festival that will be happening in Montana at the Mannix Ranch near Helmville on June 23rd through the 25th. I will actually be there, which I am so excited about. I am going to have a chance to meet so many people that I haven't yet met. There are going to be open cook fires with some incredible local beef and lamb and pork with some incredible chefs there. There's going to be live music. There's going to be some speakers, including people that you've heard on this podcast, like Nicolette Nyman and Ed Robertson. Diana Rogers is going to be there, as well as Deborah Magpie Erling and some other incredible guests. And I think that it is just going to be, like I just said, an incredible chance to get to connect and experience some food and some conversation and some aliveness, if you will, all together. And there's a link for that in the show notes. And I really hope that you're able to join me so that we can meet. I know I got to meet so many of you over this weekend at the What Good Shall I Do conference. And I'm just looking forward to more of that in-person connection, more hugs, more handshakes, more eye contact. And I think this is going to be a wonderful place to find that. As we do many weeks, I would love to read a review from the podcast. These reviews are absolutely blowing me away and making me feel so honored to be in this reciprocal space with you. And as always, I like to offer that if you leave me a review on the podcast, take a snapshot and send it to my Instagram or my email, kate@groundworkcollective.com. I'd love to send you a little piece of snail mail so that we can connect in this plane here in tangible ways. And it's without further ado that I'm going to read this review from Panlad that really moved me. For the curious heart and open mind. These long-form interviews and conversations with Kate never feel forced. They move freely from the practical and economic to the deeper philosophical and spiritual aspects of living through this tipping point. The questions are well thought out and require the guest to offer more of themselves than is normally given. Kate is an excellent interviewer, and she offers a deep well of knowledge and insight for the curious listener. She is a kindred spirit for those of us that are seekers, always questioning the answers we receive and the beliefs we internalize. I was so grateful for this interview. It was just too kind and really touched on. I really hope to offer you a different view of the guests that we have on this podcast and some of the aspects of their work. And always, I want to be here for the seekers and the questioners in this space. So thank you so much, Panlad. And thank you to everybody that has left a rating and a review. It really helps others find and connect with this show. It is my pleasure to produce it. And I felt really in touch with this weekend. I really want to be able to share the incredible stories that I feel are unfolding in the recordings of these podcasts, and these reviews really help others find some of that social proof that this podcast contains some really incredible stories, because it has just been my honor to tell these stories over the last year, and they have transformed my life in ways that I never could have imagined. And I hope that you are experiencing even just a little bit of the same. And I think that's it. There are no more housekeeping items. I hope to see you in Montana in June. If I had the chance to hug you this weekend, it was such a pleasure. And I am really looking forward to putting this podcast with Andreas out into the world and hearing what y'all thought. If you've picked up his books, I know that I've mentioned them in previous interviews. I know it came up in our interview with Katie Forrest, with Adrienne Grenier, because I was just so inspired by his work these past few months. So I can't wait to hear what you think. And without further ado, here is the incredible Andreas Weber. really feel in anticipation. Oh, it's just such a, I was just telling you, it's been such a pleasure to sort of immerse myself in your brain, and I'm excited to be in conversation. And as I was considering how I might open this interview, because I find the beginning of things to always be the most difficult, I actually wanted to let Rilke ask the first question. And you you are so poetic yourself, and you weave poetry throughout your work, and so I thought that this might be a fitting space, and so I'm going to read a stanza, and it ends in a bit of a question, and so I thought we might start there, especially as I considered.
It's great. I mean, that's not a weird place at all for me. Really. I've lived with him, and actually, I just yesterday I had a conversation with some friends and colleagues over email about some of his poetry and his stance towards reality. So very good. It's just it's continuing over from yesterday. You see, I already have some prepackaged thoughts for you on that.
Oh, I
Which
love that. I love
I
it
did
when
yesterday. I prepared yesterday. Okay, go ahead.
I love
I'm
that.
curious which poem.
Yeah, so I'm in the middle of the second elegy.
Hmm.
And he says, "For our part, when we feel, we evaporate. Ah, we breathe ourselves out and away. From ember to ember, we give off a fainter scent. True, someone may tell us, you're in my blood, this room. The spring itself is full of you. But why? He can't hold us. We vanish in and around him. And the beautiful ones, ah, who holds them back? Appearance ceaselessly flares in their faces and vanishes. Like dew from the morning grass, what's ours rises from us, the way heat lifts from a steaming dish. Oh, smile, going where? Oh, upturned look, new, warm, departing surge of the heart. Alas, we are the surge. Then does the cosmic space that we dissolve in taste of us."
Mm.
And I found a couple of different translations of that last question. One being, does the cosmic space that we dissolve in taste of us? And the second being, does the outer space into which we dissolve taste of us at all?
Yeah.
And I'll throw the
Okay.
German in the chat for you in case
Oh
you
yeah.
want to.
I was about to get up and get this book again, which I yesterday got yesterday from my bookshelf. But if you have it here,
Yeah,
I
and
yeah. Okay. So
I
I
won't
need to.
embarrass both of us by trying to say it in German, but I put that last question in German in the chat.
Schmeckt denn der Weltraum, indem wir uns lösen? Probably it's indem wir uns lösen nach uns. Okay. If it doesn't disrupt the recording, I will just get up and get the book. Is that
Yeah,
okay? I
absolutely.
see the
Please. No,
wider.
not at
I see
all.
the
I
wider.
love that.
Because you know what? I really lived with those elegies for long years, and so that's probably that has been the most lived through part of Rilke's work. And then the elegies somehow faded, and I went further into the last part of his work, the sonnets. And
Mm-hmm.
I'm dwelling more there at the moment. Just give me a second. I've
Yeah,
already.
yeah. Pull it up. We have all the space in the world.
Look. And,
Here we
and
are. I have mine, which also has the
can you
German.
can you see my? It's from 1988.
88. I love
That's
it's
when
the year I
that's
was
when I,
born.
that's when. Well, that's not by chance, obviously. Okay, so it's number two, right? I know
Number 2.
I really want to find it. And okay, so where in number two, as they are long, it's relatively like.
It is. So it's it's sort of the third part from the beginning.
Okay.
For our part, it starts.
Schmeckt denn der Weltraum, in dem wir uns lösen, nach uns? Okay, yes. Okay, yeah. Well, absolutely. That would be my answer. Totally. Yes. Totally. Only that the thing which somehow is not um, um, space compatible, total whole compatible, is our personal ego, which
Mm,
which will dissolve and needs to dissolve. But that doesn't mean that our experience will dissolve, and our being luminous part of the luminous ground will dissolve. And I think he's talking about this. And he is such a profound mystic, and what he's doing in his late works is to describe this realization that through the individual process of expression, of creation, of being poetic, the whole somehow realizes itself. And then again, all this is dissolved in the whole, which is somehow the greatest achievement, this dissolution. And I could quote you another more other poems and
be my guest.
um, to show you that he's really after this. And he wasn't understood at all. Looking back, he's not really one of the most celebrated poets in German culture at the moment. He
Mm,
is somehow under the suspicion of being a bit too romantic and not modern enough. And
mm,
so you maybe this is changing a little bit, um, but he was he was somehow misunderstood, or it wasn't seen that he was actually really doing a profound spiritual work there. Who did see this was Joanna Macy, who translated Rilke, and that's, I think it's the best English language translation. It's not, she didn't do the rhymes, which is a bit difficult sometimes, but it leads you to weird constructions if you want to let it rhymes all the time where it rhymes in the original language. So
yeah.
that's my preferred English language translation of Rilke. And of course, as she's a Buddhist and she's concerned with life and ecology and the whole, he's absolutely meaningful for her. Yeah, great
This
start.
thought, good. This thought occurred to me as you put forth in our email back and forth the idea of becoming edible. And I think that your work is so fantastic at describing in so many ways this constant transformation of matter that is underlying all of life at every given moment, that
Mm,
we are experiencing these interpenetrations of matter turning into us and turning into us, turning into other, and dissolving into that space. And I wanted to open there on that idea of this constant and eternal transformation that is always happening.
yeah. Yeah, well, you said it very well, and thank you for putting it that well. It's, if you ask me, give a little concise statement about being edible, I wouldn't have been able to put it that well. So, but I can elaborate on that. So it totally makes sense to have started with Rilke, because what he was saying was, he was talking just about this. He was talking about life as constant dissolution um, into the all-encompassing life, and and actually the process of creativity itself as being this dissolution. And again, meaning
Mm,
that if that happens like this, it also means that um, dissolving, we find ourselves. That's the statement you, or the question you put into the chat. Does the whole all-encompassing space tastes of us? And yes, it does, because this space is the inner core of life, actually. It is the living center and the living expansion. And as our inner core is this, so absolutely, of course it does. And people who pertaining to different spiritual or religious schools know about mystical experiences, they will all tell you the same, that by being able to step out of this limitation of the thinking ego, what they discover is home, is themselves in completeness, in this all-encompassing ocean of reality. And not get back to being edible, to make it a little bit more concrete. So what I'm talking about when I use this term, which also will be the title of my next book in German, Essbar sein, and hopefully then also in English at some point, is actually that the fact that the living reality of the biosphere is just repeating this process of becoming aware that we are the whole reappearing in different individualities. I can say it like this now, as I have realized that actually what I've been coming to from philosophy of biology, or from rethinking biology, and from the training with my dear teacher Francisco Varela about living organisms as the desire to bring forth themselves as living centers, is actually nothing else. It's nothing else than the realization that there is only one whole, with all these little swirls and eddies, which then again dissolve into the whole. But which means that actually in these eddies, it is the whole itself which realizes itself. And so every individual, in a way, is a manifestation of that and can go there. And but the fascinating thing is that if you look at the empirical side of that, so on a level below any form of experiential realization, it still holds, and that is fascinating. And it's interesting that science, which knows this, because what I use for this argument are bits of empirical science, of biology and of physics and chemistry and biochemistry and all these things. So it's nothing esoteric at all. It's not woo-woo at all. But it's interesting that science, or the scientists, are not really interested in this fact. So it's because it's somehow not on the agenda, and the agenda is much more about struggle for life between individuals, which, as we have seen, are only transitory states in the dance of different phases of this encompassing whole. So it's our culture who is not interested in this, and with a lot of bad consequences, because it's not interested in let's say in the aliveness which is manifest in our reality, and so we're destroying it. But that's another thought we might be talking about. And so it's actually not even something particularly special. And when I'm talking of being edible as the fundamental feature of living beings, then I always, if you have looked at some material in the internet, you know this, because I always go there. I always come to breathing and eating, and so it's actually very simple, because what we do is when we eat, so we eat other beings who are edible like us. So I had as somebody who's spending months of his life every year in Italy. I had some pasta for lunch, and this the grain in this is made from mainly from carbohydrates, and those become my body. And you see this in the, if you look at the chemical reaction, you can see this, and you have been taught this in school, I bet, in whatever mid-term biology or whatever it's called, like in seventh grade or eighth grade, you've learned this. And then still we're not pointed to the fact that through this transformation of the bodies of others into our own body, we are actually in a continuum of bodies being connected, like linked in a chain or a string of pearls. And then we give our body away by breathing out. So that's the next movement, is that in the same central chemical reaction, circular reaction in every cell, we shed carbon and we breathe it out as CO2, as we know. Everybody breathes out CO2. So that's our body. So we're giving away our body. And where does this body go? And I mean, now it becomes really, really interesting. This body is being eaten by the plants. And it has made their body. So that the carbon which I breathe out right now, in this moment, will go when I open the window. Actually, the windows are a bit leaky because it's an old flat. So actually it goes outside and it goes into the...
Me too.
Into the... But good for you. So you can share your body directly with the plant beings outside, And I think it's such a mystical insight, and it's not a single scientist would contradict you, because this is just what is happening. You could radioactively label it, and but it's incredible. So obviously, my identity is not the identity of my body, because my body is completely fluid. It's changing all over, and it's actually, my body is actually the wheat's body, and then it's again the maple tree's body, and as we all know, as the saying goes, every atom in ourselves once, just to make the link to the space. Rilke was talking about every atom in ourselves was once in the center of a star, of an exploding star. So we actually, all the matter in the universe is somehow off the same source and going back to the same source, and we're just part in this transformation. So we are very much at home in this, and we can only exist through this. And which shows you, like, coming from this point, it shows you that the identity of my ego is something very dubious. So it's not something set in stone. It's something which I realize through togetherness with other beings. I realize through the fact that I am actually not just a simple single self. So you see, it's... Yeah. Okay. I stop here. You have more questions. Yeah.
I'm a farmer, and I raise a lot of my own food. And I think a lot about intimacy within our food system and intimacy within our biology. And I think that you explained it in a way that I cannot, but we have this relationship that happens when we eat, where this matter that I think in many ways is borrowed from deep time. This is how I think of this, right? We are just borrowing this matter, but this matter that was once other, in the form of plants or animals, whatever that is, becomes a part of us as it diffuses through this one cell wall thick membrane in our intestines. And I think this blurs that boundary, which is diaphanous to begin with, of self and other. And then to bring in this other piece, here we are home to many microorganisms. We're home to bacteria and fungi and yeasts, whose genetic material very well might outnumber our own.
Yeah, it does.
And so
Yeah.
And so that relationship of what is self and what is identity, and that boundary that isn't fixed of my organism, as all of this matter recursively cycles through.
Mm.
And I think to bring it back to bring in this other piece, that we have this sort of reductive view in science, while all of these things are empirically true, that is so serving to the self of the individual and the parts rather than the whole. And so
Yeah.
there's this tension between self and other, between parts and whole.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, I mean, you nailed it. So it's actually the way we see the world is not, it's not following the way the world is, but the way we should see the world, because the prevailing discourse wants it to be. Or you could even say the
Mhm.
prevailing power structures prefer this, because they prefer a competitive view, in which violence is legitimate. And
Mhm.
but we can, I mean, it's easy to truly look, to really look at what there is, and then this will change our view. And as you say, we can even go a step back, before that, what I started to explain by our metabolism, and we can look at what one biological unit is, one organism, and we see there's no such thing as one organism, and one organism is always many organisms. And in the scale of being linked to the ecosystem, but also in on the level of what is actually my organic identity, or the organic identity of a cell. And if you go back in biological time, as you know, then we know that um, the cells, the type of cell we are made from, and plants and animals are made from, are actually made from combined, a combination of different cells. So that's endosymbiosis, which Lynn Margulis discovered, and she had difficulties to get this through, because all these these male competitive colleagues didn't want her to have this, to find this. So, but she prevailed, because it's, you can prove it. And you see, even when I bought this book, and I was in school, we were taught her theory along other theories, and it wasn't decided. So we learned several
Mm.
theories of how the higher cells came to be, but now it is clear this has been settled. And so actually, there is no such thing as one single individual which you can in any way detach from the rest. This is a myth, and it's actually, well, it's a myth, but it's also wrong. And if you use wrongness in order to find your way, then you'll hurt yourself and you hurt others.
Oh.
And that's what is happening right now. So you leave a trail of destruction. If your maps are wrong and your ideas are wrong, then inevitably you'll destroy
Mm.
beings, things, others, and you destroy yourself. I mean, it's like literally, if you have a wrong map and a tank, and you follow that which is not a street, and you plow through houses and forests, etc., and you destroy a lot of things, because you have a wrong idea of what there is and what there is not. That's a way, a little bit like what happens because of this idea of competition between individuals, which are somehow always about defending themselves against others. Yeah, I mean, the whole thing, that self is only possible as other. I'd really put it like this. So self is other. Yeah, you cannot even, it doesn't make sense at all to detach those. And then again, other, coming back to this thing, which is the sentence which is still in the chat. This other is also self, you know. So
Mm.
it's not that horrible, because this other is also self. And yeah, I envy you for your beautiful profession, and for your beautiful occupation. which is about nourishing life, which is actually what is life is about. Life is about nourishing life. And it's also a painful profession in this world, I imagine. It's very painful.
Yes.
Yeah. So it's, you see, it is all there. And again, no biologist or very few biologists would contradict me when I say the level of looking at the organism, there is nothing which is sort of rock solid self. It's always a process of, well, my teacher said reciprocal specification. It's always self is other. Or he said, Francisco Varela, he used this term that organisms are meshworks of selfless selves, and so all these ideas of defending and fighting and struggling, it's this at best it's a fragment of reality, and in many cases it's just a myth or a lie, you could say. And
Yeah.
there was just one thing I wanted to add, which is yeah, because defending the self is a metaphor of immunology and of illness. It's about alien invaders attacking an intact body. And if you're looking at how the immune system works, then you understand that it's not at all like this. It doesn't work like this. So there is nothing which is already an intact body. So the immune system on a profound level is actually about establishing a sense of identity from moment to moment. It's not about defending anything which is already there. It's about realizing something very fleeting. And so this whole metaphorology, this whole imagery, is from it's war imagery. There's the enemy is on the other side of the border,
Yeah.
which unfortunately happens. I mean, as we can see in Europe. So these things happen, but this is not how bodies work. So this is not how life works and how life should work. Okay. Yeah.
Well, I wonder, as you were speaking, if we've come to view life in the metaphors of competition, then it, and I think through your work, what you're establishing is the idea of collaboration and of interbeingness, to go back to Francisco Varela, to call it reciprocity, to call it a reciprocal act. And to recognize, I guess, in it, I'm not quite sure what my question is yet, but that we are constantly exerting change on one another through our environment and through this act of reciprocity and co-creation, that you can't really tease one from the other. Like we are creating our environment, and that is creating us.
Yeah, that's important. I mean, even the word environment is somehow misleading, because then we immediately have the idea, okay, there's a that's the background and I'm the foreground. And it's somehow we are that which we call environment also. Like when I tell you that when I breathe out, that's the carbon in the air is my body, which is then feeding the trees. So actually in the moment I breathed it out, it's my environment, but it's still me. It is also me, and then it becomes the tree, but I'll eat the fruit of the tree, so it's still me in a way. So it doesn't make sense at all, and it doesn't make sense at all. But I mean, this follows an old tendency of Western thinking to separate into the sole agents and the rest of the world, which is just things. So we need to see that this ideology of competition builds on something older, which made it only possible, which is the idea of a hierarchy of being. And humans, and we need to see, so in brackets, particularly white male Western humans are very much on top, just below God. And they can decide who is a thing and who is equal. And and then all these links and all these mutual transformations are declared non-existent and must be suppressed and must be destroyed, and that's what we're seeing. But it is really wrong. And I mean, we do see competition. So we do see in this reciprocal transformation, we do see every form of complication and struggle. So it's not I'm not talking about a sort of harmonious paradise where there's only happiness, but all these complications happen on the ground of a profound identity or a profound interchangeability. And seen through this, they become something very different as this bleak competition around getting hold of the biggest number of objects which are lying around. It's I really see this as a failed metaphysics. And it's a sort of how would you say this in English? It's a sort of strange exception from other metaphysics. So if you look at cultures, um, they you rarely see, like other cultures, older cultures, indigenous cultures, Eastern cultures. You don't see a thing like Western culture where there is this clean separation between um, the only real agents and all the rest which can be dominated. It's a strange aberration. Well, that's the word I was looking for. It's very strange that this happened actually, because it doesn't make the participants feel well. It
No.
makes everybody, and it started and it didn't make the participants feel well for centuries. So it's because competitions becomes the actually the main occupation of everyone, and because this strange split goes through everyone. So I am, as we know, that's called the problem of dualism, or the mind-body problem, or whatever, however we call it. The strange split that on one hand I'm this commander of the only agent, and on the other hand I'm obviously part of outer space as well, because I'm made of matter, and how can I reconcile this? And so that's the profound problem of Western thinking. And if you go back to looking at philosophy, of the lineage of philosophy in the West, starting with Plato, you see that they try to understand this enigma, which actually was a creation of a worldview. So if you start to view the world as profoundly split, and it isn't, so beyond your view, it behaves as not split, but you insist on having this wrong view, then things become very enigmatic, and you cannot explain them. And and you feel lost. You feel lost in this world because you're the only one. Okay, everything else is dead stuff. Oh God, so what can I do? How can I connect? And it's actually horrible. It's a sort of it's acute trauma pathology, and which builds the bedrock of Western culture in many respects. So that's where we are.
I think too, I want to bring into this the word isolation, that I think in that
Mhm.
split, we become isolated. And to, for beings that exist in relationship to
Yeah.
everything else, I think isolation is incredibly traumatic. In that, I'm curious what you think it would take to heal that rift. And I actually want to pull something that you said about healing at the end of, it was either Matter and Desire or The Biology of Wonder. Um, You said nature does not confer salvation, but healing. Healing
Mm.
means to transform the oscillating dance on the razor's edge of aliveness into the beauty of a new imagination of what life can mean. It is a process, not a state, and thus never to be secured. It is a dynamic balance tied to the moment and to the situation. Healing means to overcome the cleft between the individual and the other, between the individual and the whole for one short moment. You go on to say, healing does not signify finding the definite answer, but responding with another, more interesting question.
Mm. Yeah. it's very interesting to. I think that's biology of wonder. It's very interesting to reread myself or to listen to myself at a well, it's still the same project. Or it's still my work, but I'm on somewhere on another level. Let's say, or I'm looking at it from another perspective. It's very interesting to see that to see the same idea confirmed in a way in my more recent experiences. And you see what I say there. I, I'll still again come back to Rilke. So that will be our guiding light, obviously, in
I
many
like that. I
two
like that
respects.
as a
So,
touchstone.
yeah. Well, it's a lovely touchstone. Rilke as a touchstone. So I'll come back, Jim, in two respects. So first, and I knew this somehow, so I was a little bit alluding to this. So one of his most famous sayings is he wrote in his letters to a young poet that instead of searching the answers, it would be better to live the questions.
Mm.
And so I'm somehow alluding to this. And what that means, I'd say, is to surrender into being and into allowing to let down to break down the borders of your momentarily self, which you are right now, and just allowing yourself to transform yourself into what you're not yet, and into what is other, and into what you will be. This is the way of the biosphere, and this is the way of our body, and this is somehow also, I mean, not only somehow, it's surely also the way of our living experience, only that we are so afraid of this all the time. But if we live in a cosmos which in no point ever is alien to us, because actually it is made from that which is in our innermost center, then we can trustfully surrender. At least we could try to convince ourselves that we could trustfully surrender. And where this conviction, this work of convincing ourselves and of gaining trust, it happens, is among other beings, other than human beings, who actually very trustfully do this all the time. And I think that's one of the profound healing powers of what has been called nature, what I don't like to call nature because it sounds so much like a big, nice object. And as I was talking about healing there, healing against salvation is letting yourself into this process of flourishing and blossoming through giving away, through letting go, through mutual transformation. And I think when we walk into nature, into landscape, into the society of being, I'm looking out of my window where these early blossoms start to break from the buds of the trees. It seems like right now, because it's a sunny afternoon and it's a bit warmer. It was very cold, so somehow they all feel like, okay, wow, let's go. Like it happens before my eyes while I'm talking to you. So this is that's why so many people search this without knowing. So then others tell them, well, this is forest bathing because there are good molecules around, which is true. But what is actually happening is that there is a profound connection into the metamorphosis of being, and which is profoundly healing. But it is not rescuing yourself. It's much more stressing your impermanence. And it's nice. I mean, we can bear it if we can bear it if we go there. It works because actually we get teaching from all these other beings who are our mentors, and that helps tremendously. Yeah, I don't completely entirely remember the question actually, but maybe I didn't answer it or said something else.
No, I think that oftentimes a question leads to one
Oh,
place
true.
that is
Yes,
exactly where it's supposed to be.
true.
If that
It
makes
was the
sense.
question which I tried to. I had to live into it, and in order to get out with another question.
Mhm.
With another,
Mhm.
okay, yeah. So,
And I think you've put us in this place, you mentioned surrender, and I think that this is such a beautiful place to begin, and the surrender to the idea of impermanence. And I think a lot about there's something about being on the farm that I think calls death back to place, right?
mhm,
That this is something that feels like a part of maybe not my daily experience, but this frequent experience.
mm,
And my friend James related recently the idea that in many ways agriculture took what was a circle and broke it into a line. And
mm,
I've been thinking a lot about what it would mean to resolder the line into a circle again. And I think that there is this point that is death that we have really pushed to the side as part of the transformative experience that is life and aliveness.
mm,
And to come home to death and impermanence in a
mm,
way to maybe begin to heal that rift, to go back to that first question, but certainly to feel our own aliveness and to begin that process of surrender.
mm. Yeah, I agree. Completely agree. And um, so talking about or allowing death to enter the picture, I think two things are important. I see two things as important um, at this point, and one thing is that um, death is real, and death is a transition which is a profound challenge. And I'm not only talking about um, death as the end of our individual embodied existences. I'm also talking about this, but also death as little ends in little smaller things and life parts of life and projects and so there's
Yes.
death is everywhere, and it is needed, but it is a challenge. So it's important to see that it's a challenge. So it's important to see, or for me it's important to stress that um that how can I put it, that we need to see with this double vision. We need to see that something can be a profound challenge, but it can also be an incredible rewarding transformation in
Mhm.
both together. So I don't want to make any publicizing for a beautiful world in which death is an illusion. In a way, it is, but as we are embodied, it is a challenge. So it's important. It's important to see this because in being a challenge, and now I'm trying to home in on the term surrender, which is very important to me, even right now in my work right now. It's a very important term, very important practice, because it it gives you the opportunity to surrender, and this is very important. So you see, death is, in a way, what death does is break down your ego, and it will break down your ego in big time. That's when you when the obituary is written. But it also breaks down your ego in small times, when things don't work or break up or crash, or you give up. You have to give up something, or you have to digest failure, or go through grief. And so this is an occasion um, to find yourself as something bigger, into something bigger. And I don't say this as a cheap recipe. So it's not something which you can um, put down, bookmark, and then pull out when the time is there, and said, okay, this guy said, well, actually, it's my occasion to surrender, so I'll do this, and everything is fine. So it's really like falling into the void. But in surrendering to this fall, one realizes that you're meeting yourself, and you're meeting in yourself, you're meeting this luminous ground, which is the stuff this reality is made from, and from which life comes. So that's the ground where life grows, and it can only grow if we do surrender. And it might sound a bit mystical, because it is. it's so it's not nothing which you can do. It's nothing which you can do on purpose. Like, okay, I do this and I do that, and then I'll get out this. So it's something which, because you never know, because it's a true challenge, because it means truly to say goodbye to your status, your being in this moment, and you have no idea, and you need to close your eyes and fall or jump, and then you will be transformed. And that's actually what makes it possible to be individual and to be part of this total coherent togetherness. It only works like this, and it always brings you back into this bigger togetherness, and it always brings forth birth from this bigger togetherness. But it's always a struggle, and this is why all cultures have their ways to celebrate that. And so there's no culture in which death is somehow just nodded away. So, okay, no problem, death. It's always related to deep celebration and to mourning and to grief / praise, as Martin Prechtel so extremely poignantly, beautifully says. So it's surrendering to the grief coming with death is at the same time the praise of the life which inheres in death, or in that which had to die, which needed to die. Yeah, so that's what I can say to that at the moment. And it goes without saying that in our culture, all these things are not trained at all. So this is all something which doesn't happen, because in our culture, death is to be avoided, and it's shunned and put to the side, which leads to the fact that there's so much death in our culture. And I mean, as you're a farmer, you're as a farmer, as a conventional farmer, you're the messenger of death, because you're just killing so much lives all the time. That's the way you do agro technocratic farming. That's like distributing death in order to push death away. You're buying into death, which is a horrible paradox of our culture. Yeah. You look like you want to ask one more question into what I have been saying. And while you're thinking about this, I'm going to do two things. I'm going to the bathroom, and I'm going to get me 2 cookies. I brought
Perfect.
a bag of Italian cookies, and I actually your questions make me hungry, so I'll be back in a minute. If that's
Perfect.
okay.
Yeah, I'll consider my question.
Yeah. Okay.
Do you have your cookies?
I have them.
Perfect.
I hope it won't be too intrusive when I munch one. Let's see.
You know, I really appreciate the sort of idiosyncrasies that come through on these recordings of dogs and trains and various other phenomena that make their way into
Yes.
this. It gives it some life,
Okay.
I think.
Very good. Yes.
It doesn't need to be sterile. So eat the cookie. I've had this thought recently, and this called to it. I heard you say in an interview that you have this vow to embrace the necessary deaths that we go through
Mhm.
throughout life. And I think that some of these could be defined as rites of passage that I think we've largely lost in Western culture. And I think others can be described as, been thinking some about the life cycle of a star, right? And as it begins to die, it creates this void. And as you said, we have to go into that abyss, that we have to go into that pain or that grief. And I think that in seeking to live forever or to have life in perpetuity in the way that much of our culture has kind of framed this, and to push away death, we have also pushed away the transformative nature of grief and of pain.
Mm.
And one of the things you said towards the end of Matter and Desire was, there is no transformation that does not also hurt. The
Mhm.
pain is part of reality. Every experience is one of being wounded by reality, but also unavoidably one of being transformed by reality.
Mm.
And I think within that, I and I don't know quite where the question is, but we have siloed death away from us. We've outsourced it in our technocratic agricultural situation. And in that, I think we have also foregone a lot of the grief and pain with which comes transformation.
Mm. Yeah, I mean, the problem is to forsaken transformation, because um, when we say, like we did at the beginning, that self is all the time other, then forsaking transformation means to kill yourself, to stop your own individual existence. So it's very short-sighted to plan like this. And we can see right now, as we are at the um, we're standing at the fringe of this Earth historical abyss,
Yes.
which is called climate heating or sixth extinction, or however you call it, which is inevitable, which will happen. Um, we see that this is, and we know that this is due to fossil fuels, on which capitalism runs. So we really
Mm.
know that this is intimately linked to the project of shunning death, and you see what this brings. So if you are part of a of a living whole which constantly recreates itself as its center, then to try to avoid death, which is a part of this recreation, every recreation, every creation, every creation and new creation means that you need to give up something in order to have the ground for a new creation. So if you say, okay, we want we want all the good, all the goodies, all the nice things, but we don't want this disturbing death, then you ignore part of what is real. You ignore actually the center of what is real, because we have seen that death links us to the whole,
Mm.
and it does so much more than ecstasy, which also can link us to the whole. But
Mm.
it is, the door is death, and if we say, okay, this doesn't exist, so we have philosophers who tell us, well, it exists, but it's nasty, and we can somehow put it. Let's just try to not think about it too much, and to avoid it, and invent technologies which, for the elites at least, make it far and far away. Then you ignore what there is, and you don't even ignore it. You destroy what the working of the world, and that's what we've been doing. And it's incredibly naive, actually. The Western culture has deemed itself always so superior to all other cultures, so rational and so empirical and so unsentimental and whatnot, and so cold-blooded and well calculating, and then it is so incredibly naive. It's like children who hide under the table and don't want to see reality. It's incredibly naive, and it doesn't work, as we see now. I mean, if you want a definition of the Anthropocene, it's that realizing that the idea to shun death does not work. That's actually what is happening in the Anthropocene. And as we would never realize it, like not the majority or not the power of people in power, realizing it in a mature way of saying, okay, that was wrong, so let's try to get it right. We realize it by being killed by it, and with us a lot of others who actually don't really deserve it, and so it's a form of realizing which you cannot really avoid. But it's, on the other hand, it's just, again, this whole, you can see this whole process as a huge horrible breakdown, but you can also see it as a rebirth. It's a preparation for rebirth, and so it's difficult to get there, but on some place everything is totally okay, and there is some level of the life, the living soul of the cosmos, or the principle of life as such. There's some level which we cannot touch at all. We have absolutely no access. So we can be as powerful as we want. We have no access at all, and this is just doing what needs to be done in order to give life. And what needs to be done right now is to override this wrong way of misunderstanding of what this world is about. And it's easy. It's very easy to override it. And we are so powerless. Many people don't know how powerless we are, but we can see now a little bit. And well, it's still sad to see so many beautiful beings somehow not being able to continue their lifelines. That's the faint coughing which you hear in the background is my dog, by the way, just talking about dogs. She's now elderly. She's going to be 16, so she has some dry cough from time to time. Maybe she wants a piece of cookie as well.
I think that would probably help. Cookies help everything.
Yeah, it's true.
I think I have a question in here. Sometimes I wonder if we have to go through this process of grand loss to give way to whatever comes next. And I want to pull in, as we talk about the sixth mass extinction event, something that you said, and you said, we are part of a web of meaningful interpenetrations of being that are corporeal and psychologically real at the same time. Humans can only fully comprehend their own inwardness if they understand their existence as cultural beings who are existentially tied to the symbolic processes active inside nature. For humans, the biggest risk of biodiversity loss is that it would bury this understanding. And this idea that in this massive, and I think what is unfathomable loss that we are living through is, and I wonder if this resonates, is both the loss of this chance to know ourselves in the interconnected web of life, and perhaps a process by which we might come back to knowing the interconnected web of life itself.
Yeah. How would I say the same thing today? So I think what is actually really worth of knowing, and what we actually can easily know, and only for some reason have so much difficulties to know, is how it is to be alive, how it is to be truly alive. And we know this because this is our core. So in this moment, you know how it is to be alive, but it might be very difficult to access it in a clear way, because our culture has done so many things to somehow block access to this. But when you were very young, you consisted only of this. That was when you even in the womb. I mean, even before, even when you were not one but two cells, that was your knowing, because that's in the center of every living being, and that's what other living beings can teach us all the time. That's what they tell us. That's what we learn from them. That's the message, and that's actually all there is to share the knowledge and the practice of being alive in a living reality. And so it's actually what we're doing is, and you see the strange way of self-fulfilling prophecy is to let go of this knowledge, to not longer access this knowledge, to not longer want this knowledge, in telling ourselves, not you and me, not me telling you or you telling me, but like in the mainstream of that this world actually is dead, and it's only made of things, etc. So and then it becomes dead, and it goes down,
Yes.
and it needs to pass through this invisible part of the circle in order to come back. But the center of all knowledge, and all knowledge about existence, is the experience of being part of life. And this is the only thing that counts, I'd say. This is the only interesting thing. There's a nice, very famous phrase from the philosopher Spinoza, who was a great mystic as well, and a panpsychist, as you'd say today. And he said the what did he say? I might slightly misquote him, but I still quote him. He says the person who lives in truth is not at least interested in death. He is only interested in life. And what I say here is a little bit the same as I said before. So you see, life is actually is the core and the extension. That's actually what is happening here. And death is only, it's a passage in the self-realization of life, but it's not really of importance. And what is important is to follow the necessities of life and the needs of life, and the desires of life and the protocols of life. This is important, and whatever you encounter is of very minor importance as long as you cling to life. And our culture turned this on the head. So it's just completely disconnected this necessity to be in service. You could also say be in service of life. So the person who lives in truth is only interested to be in service of life, because this means to live in truth. That's truth. Be in service of life. And as you quoted this passage, and other than human beings have much less difficulty to do this. So they're much wiser. That's why many indigenous peoples always defer to the knowledge of other than human beings, persons, because they know that they're much wiser. They really know what to do. They do it under all circumstances, and they not try to run away. And they accept that they might be killed if they keep on going, but they nevertheless do it. And in many ancient cultures, humans are the youngest disciples of other living elders, other than human living elders, because they know it is about life. And I think that's what I wanted to say, or that's what I said in a slightly different way. So staying with these other than human mentors means that we are constantly taught that it is about life. And so we don't lose it. So we stay connected to it. And I mean, and that's again something very simple. So if you or anybody feels profoundly connected to their own aliveness, they feel profoundly real and profoundly happy. Nobody would ever give away this ecstatic feeling of being in the center, in the middle of your aliveness. So that's actually what we are searching. So it is actually very easy. This is the only thing that counts. All the rest, all the material culture, everything else, success, status, it's very secondary. But we've forgotten this. Many have forgotten this. But it's not far away. It's not really far away, but it needs some resolve to go and sit with this own luminous center of aliveness, which is there, which is in your heart. The Sufis call it the heart of hearts. It's there. It's there with everyone. And then again, it waits for you in outer space as well. So it's the same stuff. It's the same thing. And that's what counts. And I don't mean that everybody should at all times be concentrated only on this. That would be asking a lot too much, because it's being on that level of awareness all the time is not really compatible with everyday tasks of keeping yourself alive. I don't say this, but I say that a culture should know that it should be centered around this. So it should be actually a culture of service to life, and the distribution of tasks that should follow this idea of service to life. And again, looking back at older cultures and traditional cultures and indigenous cultures, they are always cultures of service of life. And if you go back as a farmer to earlier forms of living with the land, or living as country, with country, as they say in Australia, they use country. Then I mean, as you know, there were always some forms of agriculture, in a way, of co-creation, of abundance. But they were forms of co-creation of abundance in service of life. And they were, in case of doubt, the attitude of the humans was, you first, the others first. We are second. We are the younger brothers. We need to be taught. We need to refrain. So what goes first is life, and not me. You see, that's nothing else than what Spinoza says in this famous phrase, actually. It's nothing else. It's just saying life first and me second. And life first. And this life includes my own spark in my own center, in my heart of hearts. You see what a little cookie can do.
Well, cookie goes a long way. I was thinking, as you were speaking, about one of my favorite activities is to watch one of our goats outside chewing its cud. And I think that there's an interesting tension for me. I often think that aliveness and joy and that service to life is the perigee to the apogee of grief, and we need these poles in some ways to create our orbit around aliveness and to touch that. And I was thinking about how much I learn when I sit and I watch one of our goats in the sunshine chewing its cud and just sort of dissolving into a complete state of interbeing with everything else. At least that's how I experience the idea of an animal chewing its cud, is that there is this dissolution of everything into that single moment where it is just being that is hard for us to reach and easy also. It is both things.
Yeah. I completely agree. It's so interesting that in a way it is absolutely easy, and then going there intentionally, it can be absolutely can be impossible. It can be so difficult, but then it is very easy, and you can also train it. So people can train it, and I've just recently listened to a little talk, a very famous Buddhist teacher of a mystic lineage, which actually happens to be the teacher of my teacher, my own teacher, biological teacher, philosophical teacher, Francisco Varela, who was also a Buddhist. So this teacher, this Buddhist guru, Tulku Urgyen, taught a way of meditation which he called non-meditation. And the only thing actually was to let go of the thinking which names things, and just be in that moment. Just be there. Just be there, but without effort. and I absolutely imagine that that so many other than human beings just do this all the time. They do this all the time. They're all the time there. So which for a Buddhist disciple is the highest goal, which they try to reach for years and years of painful exercises. And the goat is there, completely effortless, because he doesn't think about his thoughts about this food. He just chews, munches. Like I mean, you see a little bit like me and the cookie. That's my meditative device. And so you see again what you describe, this the luminous moment is again nothing else but just being in your own aliveness, in the experience of your own aliveness. And it's also beautiful that your goat becomes your teacher there. You see, your goat is your guru. And it's very important to realize teachers. and so your goat is a very, very good teacher, because he's completely non-violent. He will never send you into any competition or whatever. You will always be good enough for him. So you see, he's a very good teacher. And then on the other hand, he is, or she, maybe I didn't know, so I don't know, he or she.
There are many goats. I have many teachers.
Very good, yes. And I mean, because you see, because if aliveness happens, that is profoundly our mentor. So life itself is our mentor. And in spiritual lineages, only a teacher which is able to transfer this aliveness to a disciple is a good teacher. It's not at all about training. It's really, really about coming into the center of aliveness. And everything starts from there. So for me, it's perfectly okay to have a flock of goats, a herd of goats as teachers. and or a mountain, or I go to this oak tree in the forest close to my place, and meet my teacher, and because the only thing the teacher can convey to you is to it's interesting, isn't it? Is to let you participate in the gift of life. That's the only true teaching. And you know what happens then? And this again is cyclical. So if you're given the gift of participating in life, you'll immediately be able to transmit this gift. You'll even want nothing more than to transmit this gift. You see, if you receive the luminosity of life, then you want to give life to others. And you probably know this because it's part of your profession. And but I think many people know this, and artists know this because they need to produce art when they have been touched by life, and art is something which instills life in others. So you see, that's it's also simple, and it's also a profound cosmic secret, obvious secret, that this is the way aliveness transmits itself, by giving itself away. And we can know the feeling. I mean, isn't that fantastic? So we can be so absolutely so much in the center of this reality, that we become the instrument of what the desire of this reality is. So we are actually this reality desiring to give life. And I mean, that's when I say a culture should be about being in service to life. That's what I'm talking about then.
Thank you for that. That was a beautiful explanation of exploring the reciprocal gift of aliveness and what
Yeah.
it inspires in us to put forth and cycle through. I actually want to touch on language briefly, and you brought this up a little bit ago in the conversation, that the way that we have come to define so much of our reality as dead things, it has this effect of severing us from our aliveness. And as I was reading all of your work, I was really struck by how often we use the terminology of other beings to describe our own inner experience, whether we are watching a flower in bloom or we are watching a lake freeze over, that relates back to us, part of our inner world. And speaking of your oak tree, I pulled a quote from you in this that I wanted to sort of bring into the conversation. And we'll see how it lands with the transformations of you that have happened since you wrote this. We create linguistic expressions on the basis of embodied experiences, and we can find the reference point for these experiences in other beings that embody the same existential feelings. Symbols thus become the language of the psyche. In this sense, the vegetative world in front of our eyes is nothing other than our own inwardness. Nature shows this inwardness as a silent mirror, expressing before us what is unnameable because it is within us. In contemplating the life of a tree, a human can comprehend similar forces that he knows exist within himself without having to analyze them, because again, they are part of the self with which he organizes experience. The knotty oak and the sea of grass caressed by the wind are living reservoirs of understanding, as when I sense my own powers of endurance or joy or melancholy. Because the plant is always growing, it illustrates not only the principle of self-conservation in life, but also the intensification of self. The plant is aliveness made physical, embodied in lush leaves and buds, impatient to bloom.
Yeah. The plant is aliveness made physical. that's you see, that connects very well to what I've been talking about before. You see, that's the interesting thing is that, and then I go back a little bit to the earlier parts of what you were quoting. Um, um, the interesting thing is that the let's say the inner dimensions or the spiritual dimensions I've been talking about in the last part, in the recent minutes, they have their physical, their embodied references in the living world. So it's actually the realm of experiences. If you open your eyes, you find it also incarnated in the living bodies, and it actually, what is going on with them is the same thing. So because it is the same thing, so you see, but we have been so much trained to separate these things into okay, this is only physical and that's my imagination, but they are not separate. So you can, and I mean, when I actually, you did do this in an admirable way, because you found so many um, important thoughts in my work. What I'm doing now is exploring much more the, let's say, the invisible dimension. But the interesting thing is that what I've been doing before is just the same thing, only that I've been exploring the let's say the expressive and embodied dimension of the flesh. But it is just the same thing. This is so interesting. And so it's truly the same thing. So it's not only, it's not, I might be a bit more radical now if I say it again. So it's what we might see as a symbol is actually not a symbol. It is the same thing happening, only that we access it on different levels. And again, if you see this, if you meet this blossom, you meet this flower, or the first the little blue, how are they called, blue lilies coming out, it is a manifestation of life in individualized form, like you're a manifestation of life in individualized form. So you're confronted with that in on the material level. So that material level, actually, although it is clearly a material, physical level, is also a dimension of inner experience, of inwardness. So you cannot separate it. It is the same thing. So this, what you see there, the blossom, the flower, the blossoming trees, this is inwardness exploding before your eyes. So you see, it is inwardness in which you can walk, like your own inwardness. People can bump into your own inwardness. So it's and I mean, it becomes, you see, I'm approaching a sort of rapture, because I find this so generous of the cosmos. You cannot avoid to be embraced by this sweet substance you are made of yourself. It is absolutely incredible. And then, I mean, then finally you even eat it. You eat it with joy and with love. And I mean, did anybody ask themselves why actually we love eating? Yeah, okay. The biology teacher told you, yes, because it is necessary, and if you love it, then it is easier done and you won't starve. That's what I heard. It is the typical Western explanation. But we love it because it's a profound mystical experience.
Yes.
Because it is a profound meeting of life. And I mean, we actually eating means, and we touched upon this already. Eating means that we experience, that we exchange our body with other bodies. And in exchanging our bodies with other bodies, we confirm that both my body and this other body are part of this one unified whole which desires life by granting this exchange. So what reason would be there not to be ecstatic in this experience? So it's a sacred experience. So why shouldn't we be ecstatic about it? Or drinking, if you're thirsty, it's the same thing. It's a profound pleasure. And so actually, if we really look, we meet life everywhere, and it teaches us everywhere, always. And it can have this dimension of rapture and profound understanding, but it also has this dimension of very simple care and knowing what to do next in order to keep this process of fertility and ongoing transmutation open. As you see, it's also very, very simple. You see, there's a plant which needs whatever help or space or water or food, then you know what to do. So it's, in a way, it's also it's not only, it doesn't only happen on this level of, let's say, mystical philosophical experience. It also happens on this very practical level. Okay, now I know what I have to do right now. So it happens on the level of community, in the level of relation, which again is an expression of the profound luminous oneness we are part of. We are here to nourish, and so that's how I would describe this today. Probably the passage you read, but I started from the end. So maybe okay. Now let me think. I wanted to. Yeah. So I'd become a bit broader in my idea of what is actually the profound experience in meeting otherness, and I'd say, and I think I said this already. I'd say that if we are unable to understand that it is life in which we participate, then it will vanish. It will drop through our fingers, and that's actually, today I would say the problem is the problem is that in doing so we stop being fertile ourselves. We stop giving the gift of life. That's the problem. You see, I wouldn't say, okay, and then if we don't understand it, then we'll die. That would be too simple in my thinking, And the profound problem is that we somehow pull ourselves out of this divine circle of gifting life because we have been given life, and that's terrible. That's really terrible.
Yes.
And that's what we're doing. That's what even our philosophy tells us, and the ideology behind capitalism says that don't ever give anything, be egoistic, and it's absolutely terrible because it is, if you wish, it is anti-cosmic, and I mean this really hurts. It's somehow a blasphemy, maybe one could go in this direction, but it really, really hurts. Like, it hurts like if there's somebody who is a truly giving soul and wants you to take his or her gift, and you slap him in the face because you feel so superior. You see, this is really hurting. This is really, really profoundly wrong, and it goes against the whole grain of the whole project of life. And this is why it is so terrible. It is so profoundly terrible. And our civilization is so deeply caught in this that it can't survive. It can't survive if it works like this, because it's so absolutely outlandish, this attitude. It cannot be allowed. It just cannot be allowed.
it calls to mind for me that in a biological system of isolation, that cancer is a disease of isolation, right? It
Mhm.
is a cell that can no longer communicate with the whole. And
Yeah,
for us to remove ourselves from the cycle, as it were, to remove ourselves from this recursive and eternal act of reciprocity in
yeah,
isolation, and to not give back in I mean, in the beautiful metaphor that you put in with eating, this act of, one of my favorite definitions of intimacy is a union of particles, right? And so
mm,
eating is coming home to
mm,
self and becoming other and giving
mm.
all at the same time
Yeah, yeah.
in
Thanks.
this metabolic
That's
act.
yeah, yeah. That you put it very well. Yeah, yeah, yeah. That's I like to I like this. Yes, yeah. But you were
Um,
going somewhere. Yeah.
Good. Yeah. I was just going to remove ourselves from that cycle, and to really distill what you said, and put emphasis on it is worse than death. Death is
Mhm.
a part of that cycle, but to see ourselves as being outside of or above that cycle,
Mm, mm.
I think that the ramifications of that are something that that we are living.
Yeah, yeah. It's interesting. I mean, it's interesting to think in the direction of a hierarchy of horrors. So it's not even this attitude means not even to be a killer. It means to be somebody who actively suppresses the idea and the practice that the reality is giving life. So, and giving life is actually giving a gift. I mean, this is I always arrive at this point that somebody who is who is presented with the most precious gift in all innocence reacts with disdain and violence towards the one who gives this. And he forsakens all possibilities of future existence because he with this he steps out of reality. And so this is that's the level which we're witnessing. Um, it's incredible. I mean, for me one of the biggest enigmas actually is why did this thinking gain ground? What happened? What happened? Because we know people who are living
Mhm.
in more life-centered cultures, although they might live on materially very difficult terms, they're empirically they're always happier. You have all these empirical psychological
Mhm.
in, investigations which show that those people are just like empirically happier. So if you grew up in such a culture, and I mean, we're not talking about depression and despair because they are colonized and decimated and destroyed. So that's on another page. But just if you live in this sort of culture, you live a good life because you live life. You are part of life. And then people somehow decided, let's stop that. We have something better. we have we have permanence, individual permanence. We want individual permanence fortified by possessions. It's very strange that this happen.
I think about a lot the when this happened, or the process of it happening, because I don't think it
Mm,
happened in one fell swoop. I think that there
mm,
were little fractures
mm.
in this throughout
Yeah.
time, and I wonder if in many ways it's sort of like, I don't know if you're familiar with Gabor Mate, but it,
Mm,
but his work in intergenerational trauma, and
mhm.
so that this viewpoint, as it begins to fracture within society and become more pervasive, is then inherited. And just like we lose a skill in generations, we lose a
Yeah.
skill of gathering or of recognizing different plant species, or whatever that is, that skill becomes lost in time, the skill of knowing
Mm,
our place in
mm,
the interconnected web of life.
mm. Yeah. I think the term trauma is very helpful to understand, and it's very helpful to see the society we're part of as profoundly traumatized, as a trauma generating society. And so maybe it was enough to start trauma by one huge violent action, and then generating many traumatized people who started to be violent towards others. Maybe it's possible, because trauma tries to fortify itself, because the source, the roots of trauma become untouchable because they are so painful, so they need to be hidden. And because they are hidden, you'll be violent to others, and they will be traumatized. And I mean, Gabor Mate describes this very well, as do others. And we look back on 10,000 years of trauma history in the West. And
Yes.
yeah, that's true. And this is one of the reasons it is so difficult or impossible to get out of this, because there's a sort of natural block which prevents trauma to be dissolved, because it's so painful. And it's so it's, this strange enigma to see a whole society, a whole civilization march into the direction of doom. And further future historians, if there will be this profession anymore, they will kind of ask them, well, why could they do this? It was so obvious. But then in profoundly traumatized communities, people behave deadly, although they know. So I think it's a good perspective. It changes very much, and you see many people, many hopeful, beautiful people trying to work for mitigation of the worst, or prevention of collapse, or whatever. They still appeal to rational faculties, which don't work if you have to collaborate with traumatized people. You cannot just tell them what is the right thing to do, because they won't do it, because they are guided by other forces which are much deeper and much more powerful. It's a little bit like this. But I cannot really, as we're at that point of like what to do, I cannot offer you any working alternative apart from what Spinoza says: orient yourself towards life. And I mean, this works on the individual level, and it can work on the level of many individuals. And it always makes sense, whatever the outcome, because that's the vector, that's the desire of the reality, is to give life. So if you do that, you're good in a way.
I love this. I love this, because then I think we re-enter the cycle of surrendering ourselves to be transformed.
Yeah.
That when we go back to being in service of life, then we have re-entered that cycle.
Yes. And I mean, it becomes much smaller than thinking of how to save the planet. That was for long years, that was a profession. Like, yeah, I'm trying to save the planet, which was actually infected by the same hubris of those who weren't trying to save the planet, but who were trying to save their portfolios. The same hubris of being able to master forces which are absolutely beyond our power. It's somehow infected by the same thing, but it can be much smaller. Only that if it's much smaller, you need to follow through the whole beautiful thought of Spinoza's, which means that you're not even interested in the least bit in death. That doesn't concern you at all, because you're in service of life. And in practice, it's quite a bit to chew on, as we all know.
It's a big cookie.
Yeah, it's a big cookie. Yeah, well, it's bigger than most of the cookies in this cookie bag. Yeah, actually, yes. But it's very nourishing, Very nourishing. Yeah. Yeah.
I love that as a space to begin to. I don't want for both of us to turn into pumpkins at the 2-hour mark.
Yeah, how do I
But
look? There's some light reflexes from my glasses.
slowly
No,
becoming pumpkin. But
we can prepare for fold back the chairs and the tables and the preparing the descent.
preparing the descent. But I can't let go of the invisible dimension. I would be remiss if I were to let go of where moving from embodied matter and into the invisible dimension, which, called for me that we are as much, we are more empty space than we are
Hmm.
solid matter. And I just wonder if you might touch on the invisible dimension and where that's taking you.
Is that a prepared question or is it a follow-up to something I said before?
It is a follow-up to something that you said
Okay.
before.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, how can I put this? So there's a term I introduced some years ago in order to describe that whole, which has this embodied aspect, and it has this um, invisible, impalpable, non-spatial, non-temporal aspect. And my term for that is poetic space. Poetic because it is always generative, and because understanding in it is always done in a poetic way. So that means through participating um, in the creativity of life, or you could say in terms of we have been saying before, through giving the gift of life. So that's I call that poetic space, and the idea in that is that it is not a Euclidean space. It's not a 3D space. It is a space of the potential of life, of which most lies hidden to any forms of material embodied senses, and but we still access it, and we are in it. When I've been talking about the profound experience of our own um, being here and being this all. When I spoke about that, what the Sufis call the heart of hearts, we're in the center of this poetic space. So we exist on this invisible plane all the time, and all others exist on this. And in the same, let's say, in the same, it has the same reality as our bodily existence has, only that we have nearly completely forgotten about it. But you can go there, and you can go there in various ways. You can go there by somehow stepping out of your individuality in allowing yourself to be just sitting with your own aliveness, which works after some training. That would be called the mystical path. And you can also go there by acting, by what I've been calling in this talk, by being in service. So you can. It's also a pragmatic thing, and it's something which isn't material, but which will let sprout materiality. So it will invite being
Mm.
somehow from the invisible side into the visible side, and you can also communicate on that. So in a way, this poetic space is very similar, I think, to what Buddhists call the ground, or the luminous emptiness. And it's a nice thing to realize that we are there, and that this luminous emptiness has the, how can I call it, has the its center is the desire to give life. Do you see? It's very invisible because it's just a desire. It's totally invisible, and it's absolutely indestructible. So that's the root. And if you follow this, if you make yourself a tool of this, then you create life. Life will come into being. Life will multiply. Life will manifest. And it is the experience of being alive as well, which again is invisible. It's only inside of yourself, but it's also contagious. So you see, it's this invisible space is continuously pouring into visibility. And even if we mess it up totally as humanity, what we are currently doing, it won't change. It will still pour into reality. There's another quotation from 2nd century Nagarjuna, the Buddhist sage, who says, "When all Buddhas have died, enlightenment will burst into being from emptiness." You see, so that he said, I think, the same thing. So it's absolutely indestructible, and that is so. Isn't that beautiful? I mean, that's the source which feeds us, and that's the source from which we feed others, and it cannot go away because its character is that it cannot go away. You see, isn't that nice? I mean, isn't that pretty? I really like it. But it's, you see, you won't go and find it somewhere under a tree, although you might find it somewhere under a tree. You see, you might find a source under a tree from which clear water comes, and then you've found it. You've also found it because it has transcended that invisibility into the space of bodies. And my experience is that it is very important how we are behaving in this invisible space, and it's a place where we can do a lot with the right attitude, and which has been completely neglected by our culture. And all the rituals in all the cultures are actually working with this invisible space, which gives life. So all the rituals are tailored to make this source being benevolent and cooperative, and let's say welcoming it into all human endeavors. And Western people normally don't do this. They don't even know that this exists. Some think, okay, let's look at some YouTube videos about manifesting, and then I can have some more stuff. So it's very naive and very, very, very egoistic. But it's very important to behave well, and to be welcoming of life on this level. And I think that's also something we could do and we should do. And I think it will do a lot, because it aligns yourself to your work in service of aliveness. And it's something which to Western ears really will sound weird and strange, I think. This suggestion that we need to go there and be active there in a benevolent way, but it's something cultures which are much wiser than ours have always been doing. That was the main occupation. That was even in many cultures, that's even the idea of the role of humans in this society of being. They can do this work. They can care for life on the one hand by kindling life in the ecosystem, by being fair partners to other beings in the ecosystem. So that would be your job, the stewarding job. And on the other hand, by calling for abundance on the invisible side. So these two roles they were absolutely inseparable. So that was, if you look at how cultures understand the role of humans, it's that role. So you see, we're not the boss, we're not the one who knows better, but we are the ones who are most called to be in service, and on these two planes. And I'd say it's something important to start this service. If you're like me, somebody is estranged from that because we have been growing up in a Western system, find our way back to this nourishing work on the invisible dimension. It's really, really important.
Thank you very much for elucidating that. And I think that actually in many ways brought us to a really beautiful place of coming back to the idea of being in service and part of our role here, and to give people
Yeah,
a sort of tangible effort at the end of
yeah.
this conversation. And
You know, just when you said part of our role here, people are always normally people are happy when they have a role which is actually benign and helpful and stewarding. And this is a statistic thing. You look at surveys, people are happy when they have a meaningful role in a living whole. It is very easy. We don't know, we don't need all these things. We only need them because our neighbor or our friends have more of these things. So we also need some of these things. And but in the end, it's people are happy when they feel they are alive and they feel they contribute to life. That's actually, we are made for this. So it's crazily simple, and we've somehow strayed from that a little bit. But it's simple. It's actually simple. Yeah. Okay. 1 minute before pumpkin time. We
1 minute before pumpkin time. We're
okay.
right there. We're right at midnight. Thank you. Thank you for all of this. And I'm just so appreciative of your work, and it is so beautiful. I don't really know how to mirror back to you what this has meant in my own journey towards stewardship, towards aliveness, towards cooperation and interbeingness. And
Yeah.
I
Thanks. Yes.
think that so many of the threads we tug on here on this podcast, you have put into words in a way that I feel like I am often just dancing around. And so thank
Mm.
you for bringing that matter forth.
Mm.
Towards the end, as you were speaking, I thought about the singularities, these points of seeming smallness or nothingness or invisibleness from which everything comes forth. And whether it's the Big Bang or it's a seed in the soil or it's a person inviting more aliveness into
Mm.
this traumatic time here on Earth. And so I'm very grateful for your work.
Yeah. Thank you. No, thanks. That's to me, that's the experience of shared aliveness. So very good. And thanks for the poetic space you offered here in the last 2 hours. Yeah.
Yeah. Where can people find you? I will have links to all of your work, but
Yeah. Well, where can people find you? Sounds like from tomorrow
where
on they'll queue in front of my door. What a horror! I need to have to jump out of the window. No, I mean, you probably, if you if you did some research, so what would be helpful actually? What would you need? Like,
Hmm.
you probably have my English language website, and
Yes.
And I mean, it's if there will be some books, so if people are interested. And there's the have you taken the Advaya course I gave before Christmas? No, because that's also because it is very much my work right now to explore this invisible dimension. So it was somewhat familiar, the climate I've been teaching. So I'll send you, so it's people can still get it. So it's still there, only in recorded form. So I'll send you this as well. I can think a little bit about some more links, whatever, to send to you. And yeah, so if there's anything you need in concrete terms, tell me. I try to find it.
No, I can link to all of this, and the course
Yeah.
especially is something that I'll dive into
I
as
send you the
well.
course. Send you the course because I was actually really happy how it went, and I think the participants were as well. And it was really centering about these topics, and doing some inner invisible dimension work somehow, and sitting together online, but it works well. And yeah, so okay, so let me write it on this sheet of paper.
I can also
Sorry?
I can also remind you via
Okay,
email
yeah,
if you
remind
don't
me.
want to
As
write
you
anything
already
down.
realized, I'm somehow a bad rememberer. I try to
Not at all.
remember only the most urgent things, and okay. And yeah, well, my website for sure.
Yep.
And
I have
I
that.
think I'm going to do an on-site course in Italy in early fall.
Mm.
So let's see. I somehow hesitated to do this because it's a lot of organization, but I think I'm going to do this. So that will be on that website if somebody wants to deepen this. Okay. If you feel anything is missing, then tell me.
I'm sure that I will. Thank you so much.